friends, and welcome to the Particularly Peculiar podcast. Today we are on Season 2, Episode 2. In this episode, I will be covering sleep paralysis. I am your host, Taylor, and in this podcast, we delve into all that is mysterious, bizarre, and peculiar. Thanks for joining me. To our repeat listeners, welcome, our peculiar people. And to those listening for the first time, the peculiar people, welcome you. So, sleep paralysis. This is something that I have struggled with before. It's mostly been an intermittent problem that I've had, but I have dealt with it for many years. Honestly, probably as long as I can remember. And it is a topic that definitely intrigues me. Today, I will be utilizing sources from Stanford Medicine as well as the Sleep Foundation. I also want to say that I obviously have my own personal experience with sleep paralysis. However, I also worked in a pulmonology office where we treated those with sleep apnea and sleep disorders for many years. I have also taken many psych classes and sleep and dream classes, so there will be some info that I can kind of relate from there as well. Sleep paralysis is a totally normal occurring phenomenon. When we enter REM sleep, our body completely relaxes and loses all muscle tone, and this is what we call muscle atonia. So when does one go exactly from a muscle atonia to sleep paralysis? If an individual has awareness as the body enters or exits REM sleep, they may experience sleep paralysis. Stanford Medicine says sleep paralysis can occur in otherwise normal sleepers and is surprisingly common in its occurrence and universality. It has also been linked to certain conditions such as increased stress, excessive alcohol consumption, sleep deprivation, and narcolepsy. I will say that I have experienced episodes of sleep paralysis more so when I am stressed, when I have been drinking, when I'm sleep deprived, although I don't have narcolepsy, so I can't speak to that. There is also something known as hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. These are hallucinations or, sometimes you would just think it's strange things happening in between the wake and sleep. So while you're falling asleep or while you're waking up. There are many conditions associated with sleep paralysis and hallucinations, but sleep paralysis is most often triggered by a lack of sleep. In addition to occurring during episodes of sleep paralysis, hallucinations are associated with medications that interfere with sleep patterns and several medical conditions. These medical conditions can include any sort of like eye diseases, migraines, seizures, dementia, Parkinson's disease, alcohol withdrawal, mental health conditions, and lesions in certain parts of the brain. So even side effects from medications can cause that as well if you're dealing with those certain health issues. So that's pretty crazy. I did not know that sleep paralysis could be caused from those medications. So that's extremely interesting. Treatment of sleep paralysis is often limited to education about sleep phases and atonia that normally occurs as people sleep. If episodes persist, the sleep specialist may evaluate for narcolepsy, which is commonly present in those suffering from sleep paralysis. So again, we see with narcolepsy, that is not necessarily just a random excessive sleepiness or an excessive sleepiness because our sleep is interrupted from not breathing, but we are falling asleep a lot because we cannot control our sleep and wake cycles on our own. So it's just a lot of excessive sleepiness. So why are we talking about sleep paralysis today? Because it's weird. The weirdest thing about it is not necessarily the paralysis itself, but what people experience when they are in a state of sleep paralysis. And that's mostly what I wanted to talk about today. That's really the creepy part of the story. So as I stated earlier, those who experience sleep paralysis become aware of their surroundings while that atonia or that muscle paralysis continues for a few seconds to as long as several minutes. What this means is that they can think, see, and of course they can breathe while they are lying there awake, but they are unable to move their bodies. And sometimes sleep paralysis is accompanied by a sleep-related hallucination. This happens when the person then begins to see, hear, or feel changes in their environment, or even just sense a change in the environment. So there are some different common hallucinations that occur in sleep paralysis. Those are intruder hallucinations, incubus hallucinations, and vestibular motor hallucinations. So let's start with intruder hallucinations. An intruder hallucination describes seeing or otherwise sensing something threatening in the bedroom, like a dangerous person or a menacing presence. This type of hallucination occurs alongside the incubus hallucination. So during an incubus hallucination, a person may feel like they are suffocating or that something is pressing on their chest. So imagine like an incubus, a succubus, any sort of thing, entity coming along and climbing on top of you while you're sleeping and waking up and being like, oh no, I can't move. Vestibular motor hallucinations involve imagining sensations in the body, including movement. So almost feeling like an out-of-body experience or a feeling of bliss. Another common occurrence with sleep paralysis is the hallucination of the sleep paralysis demon. So that is the biggest thing. When I think of sleep paralysis and I hear about sleep paralysis, I am almost always going to hear about some sort of sleep paralysis demon. While scientists today do consider sleep demons to simply be hallucinations, there have been many interpretations of this phenomenon throughout many cultures, through many years. Societies have developed their own explanation for these experiences, and each of them do come from their own culture, basically. And these are extremely interesting, and I did not know about some of these until I read up on sleep paralysis. So let's get started with Lilitu. Some of the earliest writing related to sleep paralysis comes from the Mesopotamia around 2400 BC. These accounts refer to Lilitu, a female demon. Researchers believe that it is from early folklore that the concepts of incubus, succubus, and the nightmare descended from. So, nightmare. In Europe during the Middle Ages, the term nightmare referred to a supernatural entity, typically female, that positioned herself on top of a person's chest to suffocate them. So this, of course, kind of draws back to that incubus hallucination. Medical explanations up to the 20th century suggested that a nightmare, or this feeling that having a entity on top of you, was caused by stagnant blood or vapors rising from the stomach and affecting the nervous system. So that's extremely interesting to me. As far as vapors from the stomach and affecting the nervous system, we know today that the stomach does control a lot of our nervous system. So that's kind of interesting that that was something they had in mind all those years ago. Next up, there was something from the residents of Newfoundland in the 1970s they called the old hag phenomenon, or agrog. Believers attributed paralysis, pressure on the chest, and other symptoms to be blood that has stagnated, excessive work, or an enemy who wants to harm the sleeper. It just kind of shows you how things move and change over the years and how we interpret different things, but also how a lot of them stay the same. So that's very interesting. I kind of like that, the agrog. In Brazilian folklore, there is the piscideira, an old woman who lies in wait on roofs, and then she walks on the people who sleep on their backs. This character takes on a slightly different form and features themselves in various parts of the country, but mostly a Brazilian folklore. The kanishabari is a Japanese name for an experience between sleep and wakefulness involving paralysis, fear, anxiety, and sometimes hallucinations. The term kanashibari comes from a similar sounding word that describes the magical powers of a Buddhist deity, which monks were believed to be capable of harnessing power to paralyze others. So that's another very interesting take on that. Now there's the yin, or the jinn. Some in Egypt attribute sleep paralysis to yin or jinn, which are supernatural creatures associated with witchcraft, madness, and nightmares. These creatures are said to be able to terrify or possess a sleeping person. Now, I have heard about this separate from sleep paralysis and just as an entity. So that's really interesting that it came up here in sleep paralysis. This last interpretation of a sleep paralysis demon comes from Cambodia. So please excuse me if I do not pronounce this correctly or if I pronounced any of these incorrectly. This is the Kamak Sankat. And in sleep paralysis may be described using the phrase Kamak Sankat, which describes a supernatural being pushing down on the sleeper's chest or neck, which I will say is probably the most common feeling. Hallucinations may include a ghost dispatched by a sorcerer or a wizard, a demon wanting to cause fear, or a person who had died during the Cambodian genocide. So now I want to get on to some stories regarding sleep paralysis. These first few stories from sleep paralysis are from Thought Catalog. This one is called Many Horrible Things. Before I learned to cope with it, I had seen quite a few awful things. Horror films don't really do anything for me anymore because I've already seen the most terrifying things I already could. Here's just a few things I remember off the top of my head. A little girl in the corner of my room, staring at me. Then, she shrieks, runs at me, and starts choking me. A large dark figure, a human silhouette, emerging from the foot of my bed and staring down at me. Something banging and scraping on my bedroom door. I keep it locked up at night because I have had ones where it opens by itself, followed by dark figures coming into my room. The earliest one I can remember is with my mother in the room. She's sitting on my bed. Her face morphs into a demon-like thing. There are many others, but the worst thing is when you try to fight or call for help. Your voice doesn't work. Your body will not respond. You just feel helpless. I need to stop trying to remember these things. I'm getting chills. Those so accurately describe just how different these experiences can be. And I mean, yeah, they can range from anything from seeing things that are scary, almost having real, like actual night terrors where you think it's occurring at the time. Just hearing things, seeing things, feeling things. It's so scary. This next story tells us about how hard it can be to wake up. I have sleep paralysis on a regular basis, but it is mostly when I nap and not when I go to sleep for the night. I've never experienced the demon, but the experience is terrifying. I can see everything, or at least it seems like I can, but I am unable to move. It feels like if I don't make every effort to move, I will be stuck like that forever. I usually must start by wiggling a toe or a finger, and then I just keep that momentum going until I fully awake. It takes an extreme amount of effort, and if I don't keep that effort constant, I must start all over again. Yeah, absolutely. I've had that same thing. Usually, if I couldn't get myself to wake up, I would simply just have to go back to sleep, let myself fall back asleep, which is extremely hard to do and extremely scary to do when you can't breathe or you can't move. You basically feel like I'm going to die. So now I want to share a couple of my own sleep paralysis experiences. These have scared me to my core. They're something that have stuck with me forever. So I wanted to share them with you. These episodes occurred a lot more when I was young, about 5 to 8 years old. It does not help I was convinced we lived in a haunted house when I was this age. My brother first started having these experiences, and then I shortly after. So that made it even more strange. The first couple times I experienced this, I simply was unable to breathe or move. When I woke up, I would be on my stomach, and I had to fight like hell to move myself or wake myself up. The scariest one, I'm still convinced may have been a ghost, but it just fits into the sleep paralysis category so well. I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was laying in the top bunk, which I can't really remember why, as my older brother usually did, but that's beside the point. I remember not necessarily being paralyzed. Maybe it was occurring shortly after a sleep paralysis event, but I did hear heavy breathing. I was able to sit up. My bedroom door was cracked, so although the rest of my room was pitch black, near my doorway was a slice of light. And inside this slice of light, I could see just my light switch and my closet door. Just past my closet, into the darkness, I noticed a figure shrouded in shadow. This figure was darker than the blackness of the rest of my room, but I could tell it was crouching slightly and rocking back and forth. What I had noticed is that it also had a jester hat on top of its head. Interestingly enough, my oldest brother had one of these hats. And since big brothers are required to scare little sisters, I assumed that was what was happening. "Jared, stop," I managed to squeak out. No response, just heavy breathing, rocking back and forth. "I'm serious, I'm going to yell for Dad." Nothing. I believe I gave one more warning, and then I finally mustered up the courage to dive off the top bunk and make a few big strides to my light switch, slamming into the wall and splashing light all over the room, only to find nothing there. If it was my brother, he would have had to pass directly in front of me to get out of that room, and absolutely nothing moved in front of me. This figure simply vanished into thin air. Again, that was my scariest experience. I mean, I've never had anything like that before or since, and I still can't explain it. And it still gives me goosebumps. Every time I tell that story, I get goosebumps. My next one was so strange in the fact that it was a sleep paralysis event, but I was still very much dreaming. I recall being stuck face down, not being able to move, breathe, open my eyes, so on. So I was aware that I was stuck in this dream space, but I was unable to move in my physical body. However, in my dream, I was looking at myself. And in this dream, I must have been just an entity, a scary entity, as I watched my scared little 6-year-old self run around my bedroom, trying to get away from my entity self, while silently crying and screaming. She, or I, could not make any sound. Just like I was trying to do in real life, scream and make noise, but I couldn't. I was doing the same in the dream, while watching myself do the same thing in my dream. It was the most surreal and bizarre experience I have ever had. That was one of those times where I had to make myself go back to sleep. Could you imagine being in a nightmare with yourself, knowing you're in that nightmare with yourself, knowing you are scared in that nightmare, and knowing you're scaring yourself in that nightmare and not being able to wake up? Wow. And I was probably only 6 at this time. So yeah, yikes. Now, I have had this happen to me since multiple times, but they're usually very minimal. They're usually very quick, and I can usually wake myself up fairly easily. I don't know if it's because I have dealt with it before and I just know, like I know in my head when it happens that I'm going to be fine and I just have to wake myself up, or what. The worst ones are when I'm in my sleep paralysis. I wake up, I hear banging on my door, or I'll hear my children screaming. I'll hear my children crying for me. And then I'll wake up and I'll actually be in the same exact position. The lights are in the same spot. It's the same time of day. Everything is exactly the same. But these sounds are no longer happening. Which, thank God, I don't want anyone to be banging on my door while I'm sleeping. I don't want my children to be crying or screaming for me, especially if I can't get to them. But it seriously just gives you a whole other level of fear. Like then you wake up and it's not happening, and then you're even more disoriented. Like, was it happening and it just stopped that quickly? You know, and you're still waking up and trying to figure out what is going on. It's just bizarre. I've also had issues with hypnagogic hallucinations, and these have been happening a lot more lately, when I've had a lot more high stress situations. I'm usually dozing off. It's usually when I'm napping, but sometimes when I'm going to bed for the night, and I will start to have dreams, but about my current sleeping situation. It's really strange. Like I'm dozing off to sleep in real life in this twilight, so to say, and I feel like I can't open my eyes or move, but not because I'm paralyzed, but because I am dreaming this. So it's like, I'm trying to think of a good way to describe it. Like I'll be laying there asleep in between wake and sleep, and I will dream that my husband is coming to me saying, "Okay, let's get up," or "Hey, I need you." And in my dream, even though I'm still kind of awake and I know it, I can't move. I can't open my eyes. I can't talk. It's also very, very strange. And just all of these incidences are just some of the strangest things I've ever experienced. I can never explain them the way I want to. It is so hard to explain it to you in a way that if you've never felt it or had it happen, it's almost impossible to explain how it feels to someone else. So since I did discuss the figure in my experience, although unsure if I would actually call that the infamous sleep paralysis demon, I figured we would touch on what causes the thought of a sleep paralysis demon. So although the exact cause of sleep-related hallucinations is unknown, many people believe that these hallucinations during sleep paralysis occur when people are experiencing vivid dreams of REM sleep while they are awake. So technically, your brain is still doing its REM thing, and it is still dreaming like you would when you're in REM, but you wake up. So that's almost like overlaying your dream into your real life. So scientists have considered the role of hormones, mirror neurons, changes in breathing, and the survival centers of the brain, that, how these change during these hallucinations and how it can make us feel like there is a demon or a person or an entity in the room with us. So a big one is serotonin. As a person begins to wake up, hormones like serotonin suppress REM sleep and contribute to increased awareness of the person's surroundings. But during an episode of sleep paralysis, serotonin is released while the person remains stuck in REM. So this may cause hallucinations, and it can activate that fear circuit in the brain. So it would be more like when we are supposed to be waking up for our normal day. Yeah, that serotonin kicks in and makes us kind of, we're still groggy, we're still getting our bearings about ourselves, or that might be why when our alarm goes off, we're still dreaming, but our serotonin is kicking in when we hear that alarm, and we begin to become aware and wake up. Now, of course, just any brain disturbances, so malfunctions in parts of the brain, could be responsible for creating an image of a body or a human-like figure often seen during these hallucinations. These disturbances may also be responsible for a sexual nature of some of these hallucinations. Sometimes people feel phantom movements and pain in their limbs, and that could also be caused from brain disturbance. Breathing changes. When the major muscles become paralyzed during our REM sleep, our breathing grows shallower. Again, as we sleep, we slow down our breathing, slow down our heart rate, our digestion, things like that. When we become aware of diminished breathing during an episode of paralysis, we may feel like we're suffocating, or we may feel pressure on our chest. So what this means is that we actually can breathe. We are breathing fine. We are doing okay. But when we wake up in this situation, we're not in our bodies how we are typically in our bodies, if that makes sense. So we wake up in the morning and we're just awake, and our breathing goes back to normal. Our heart rate goes back to normal, and we don't even realize it, right? We just go about our day like normal. Now, when we're in REM and we wake up, when we're in our muscle atonia, our paralysis, and we wake up, our body is still doing our REM thing. So we've still brought our heart rate down, our breathing down, our temperature down, and we haven't come back from that. So it is totally normal to be where we are when we're in REM. But when we are awake and aware, that's not how we normally are, and it scares us. So we think we're being suffocated. We think we can't breathe. We think that's probably caused from an external source. So all of that stuff is really scary, right? As people begin to realize they can't move, as they begin to realize they can't talk, things like that, they get more and more scared. They're escalated. It triggers panic. It can trigger a fight or flight response. And this in turn can increase how scary these hallucinations are. So if we're already waking up, we can sense that, something's not right. We feel like we're suffocating. We maybe think there may be something in our room. And then we start panicking and we can't move. We can't look at it. We can't holler for help. We're just going to dump fuel on that fire, get more and more scared. And as all of these, hormones and things like that, all of our neurons are firing while it's trying to do something else in our brain, it's going to ramp that up. Oh, it's just so interesting. I love learning about sleep. I love learning about dreams, what our bodies do when we're asleep, what our brain does. It's also interesting to me. So, dreams versus hallucinations. Hallucinations can be hard to distinguish from dreams, but there are several differences that make these two, very different from each other. So people who experience sleep paralysis are aware that they have woken up. Dreamers most often are unaware that they are asleep. So if you have that awareness while you're awake, that's going to be considered more of a hallucination than a dream. Dreams usually take place elsewhere or even, in a place that you've never been before, never seen before, but it's usually not going to be in your home. I mean, not always, but it's just, it's usually a setting outside of your home. Sleep-related hallucinations tend to overlap with reality. So a sleep-related hallucination will occur in a bedroom or a real-life sleep environment. So if you're asleep on your couch, like I was saying, when I'm falling asleep, I'm in between asleep and awake, and I am dreaming that I can't get up when someone is talking to me, but I'm on my couch at that same time. That is going to be more of a hallucination. So a big thing that I found in this article from the Sleep Foundation and Stanford Medicine is that only around 30% of dreams are usually scary. But 90% of the hallucinations involved with sleep paralysis bring about a fearful sensation. So that's super interesting. I didn't realize that only 30% of dreams are usually considered scary. I remember having a lot scarier dreams and a lot more scary dreams when I was younger, but especially when I was experiencing these episodes of sleep paralysis, I also had a higher amount of what we would call nightmares. So many people forget their dreams when they wake, but people with nighttime hallucinations often recall these experiences very, very vividly. So a hallucination, it just seems to be very real life. Like I said, waking up in between sleep. So I guess what I was saying earlier would probably be more like a hypnopompic hallucination of waking up and thinking there's someone banging on my door. That's more of a real life situation. I recall it extremely well. I'm literally in the fear when I do truly wake up. So yeah, that's very interesting. Now, I know I mentioned this a little bit before, but in case you ever find yourself in a situation where you are in an episode of sleep paralysis, how do we get out of it? So this is an important coping strategy. People who have sleep paralysis usually know that they're having a sleep paralysis episode. I can't say that they usually know, but people who have it a lot usually are. It's almost like this feeling of deja vu when it happens. You wake up in this sleep paralysis episode and you're like, not again. Like that's how I feel about it. So good ways to get out of a sleep paralysis episode are trying to move your arms, your legs. If you need to move your head. As one person said before, try moving your fingers or your toes. Try to move your mouth or your eyes. Of course, anything that can wake you up, like an alarm clock, other person waking you up, that should bring you out of a sleep paralysis episode very quickly. But of course, you won't really have control over that. So that's not extremely helpful. A big one that I would have to do was focus on relaxing. So I would have to relax my body. I would have to basically say, just go back to sleep. And I'd go back to sleep, and then I'd just wake up in the morning like it didn't happen. Some people also use praying or reciting religious text. And this, I would imagine, would be a way to help them relax. If they're a spiritual or religious person, help them relax and help them get into a state where it's not as scary, right? People have proposed that lucid dreaming can be another way for those to gain control over their sleep paralysis. Learning methods for lucid dreaming may be able to turn these hallucinations into a more positive experience. And I think the reason why is because when we have lucid dreaming, we have a level of control to our dreams that we didn't have before. And that can help us feel a little bit better. I mean, when we feel out of control, we feel scared, right? So that is a good one that I hadn't really thought of before I did this research, but a great idea. And we should definitely do an episode on lucid dreaming someday in the future. I think that'd be great. Let me know if you guys would be interested in hearing something like that. So what can we do to prevent sleep paralysis and or the associated hallucinations? So the biggest thing is to understand what's happening to your body during sleep hallucinations. This can help you be less confused about it. It can help you be less scared. Once people understand that this is just a hallucination, it can be definitely weird. It can definitely be scary, but you are not going to be harmed in any way. That usually helps them feel better about the situation and can just make it less intense and therefore lessen the intensity of your hallucination. So make it a little less scary. I know that fear and anxiety can cause more poor sleep, which can also cause sleep paralysis. And again, like I said earlier, sleep paralysis can also cause anxiety and can cause you not to sleep well. So if you really are having troubles with anxiety, especially surrounding sleep or any time that is going to affect you, be sure to talk to your doctor or talk to your therapist, but don't ignore that you are fearful or anxious. I think when we do that, we kind of feed into it a little bit. So it's, I don't know if it's subconsciously we can do that to ourselves, but I have noticed that if I get scared or worried about having an episode, I will have an episode. So just remember that. Don't let it stay inside. Get it all out. Try to relax before bed. So relaxation helps you sleep better, of course, overall, but it can also reduce your chances of having an episode of paralysis. And I don't know if it's because if we are more amped up, more nervous, that we are easier to wake or easier to rouse, but try and get into a nice relaxed state before bed. Sleeping positions. If you're a back sleeper, try to sleep over on your side instead or something like that. This can prevent episodes of sleep paralysis. Now, I don't know if it has to do with an obstruction, like with obstructive sleep apnea, that there is more sleep paralysis. I don't know if sleeping on your back would cause an obstruction or if there's snoring kind of rousing you while you're sleeping. So maybe try to roll onto your side or something like that. Improve sleep hygiene. So this is funny because this is the same spiel I would give to people when they had a sleep study that came back as sleep apnea, or that, hey, you're just excessively sleepy. Hey, let's improve your sleep hygiene. Let's go to bed at the same time every night, wake up at the same time every morning, avoid alcohol and caffeine before bed, avoid bright lights before bed. Create a relaxing night routine, things like that. So just having a very good routine, schedule, and structure to your bedtime. Going to bed with dim lights in a colder room, avoid noise, TV, things like that in your room. And that is probably going to lessen your chances of a sleep paralysis episode. And another thing is keep a journal. Record nighttime sleep issues, daytime symptoms, track these symptoms. If it's something that is, super consistent that you're having issues, you can use this to figure out maybe what's causing your paralysis at night, what you can do to avoid your paralysis at night. And if it gets to be a more severe issue, you can take that along to a doctor's appointment and talk to a doctor. So have any of you guys ever experienced sleep paralysis? If you did, what did you see? What did you feel? How did you wake yourselves up? What do you think? I know how I said, like, when you wake up in that sleep paralysis moment, it's almost like a feeling of deja vu at that time. Like, oh no, I've been here before. I've done this before. So let me know how you guys feel when you have your episodes. If you have had an experience, email me on our website. I would love to hear your guys' story. Of course, visit us at www.particularlypeculiar.com. There you can find our socials, a link to our store, and that is where you will find that contact form to send me a message. Let me know about your sleep paralysis experience, what kind of demon or what kind of entity you saw in your sleep paralysis, or you can share other peculiar stories of your own. I'd love to hear any stories you guys have to share. Remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever it is you can do on whatever platform you use. Remember, there is a donation tab on our site where you can go if you would like to help out the show. That is all that I have for you all today, though. We will see you again soon. Until next time, our peculiar people.